Hey guys, Second Lieutenant Brock Breyer here. Today's video is going to be kind of probably the most, not necessarily requested, but the most spoken about recently in the OCS field, OCS realm, and it's going to be about land nav. So I'm not going to specifically talk about the changes to the standard that were recently implemented, but instead I'm going to kind of give some tips and tricks that I used during my time at land nav that I thought helped me, succeed. Now, this isn't going to be a comprehensive guide. I'm not going to go over like shooting an azimuth or things like that. You'll learn how to do that, and I might go over it just a little bit. But if you're looking for a comprehensive guide, there's going to be other videos that are probably more suitable, especially since I don't actually have a map of red diamond. So I'm going to hand draw it. But so this is going to be specifically for red diamond. And it's going to just go over some tips and tricks and some maybe like shortcuts or some other ways to approach land nav that I used and I found myself being successful using. So to begin, I'm going to go over a list of some things that I think are beneficial and that you might want to consider. And then after that, I'll go into a quick like demonstration and physically show you, the processes I use. So first, and these will all be clear when I actually go through the demonstration, but first tip, I guess, is when you first get your points, right from the get-go, make sure you know the route you're going to take. And what I mean by that is my recommendation is to go in a route that's like a square, with you ending on the point that's closest to you. So my recommendation is to start on the furthest point, or within that boundary. And the reason I say that is because at the beginning you're full of energy, you're not fatigued. So if you can get the first couple of points that are farthest away out of the way, then you're more likely to succeed, because towards the end, if you're running the whole time. Well, I ran the whole time. So by the end, I was exhausted. And I even at one point had gone down the wrong road and realized that. And if I had been, at a point that was really far away, I don't think I would have made it back in time. So the fact that I had waited to do my closest points to the your starting point, or to base, I think that really helped me. So that's one tip. The second tip is, so red diamond is not just used by OCS. It's used by iBullock, maybe Armor Bullock. It's used by a lot of battalions. So my recommendation is, because of that, there's going to be trails actually cut through the woods to the points. Now, occasionally they do burn the area, but even still, there's going to be padded down trails that you can use, and you can actually use them to your benefit. So I recommend using the trails. During my time, doing land nav, there were so many instances where I kind of just shot, 90-degree angle into the woods, found a path, followed it, and it ended up at the point. I wasn't using my preface, I didn't use my compass once during land nav. My I'll go into it a little later, but my procedure was, get 90 degrees of the point, find a path, follow that path, get to the point. And it worked great. And that's because red diamond is used so frequently that these paths, naturally over time develop, and you can kind of find them. Whenever I was lost, I would walk around to, do your clover, and then find a path. I would follow it if I thought it was in the right direction. And, 9 times out of 10, it would bring me to the point. My third tip is to run the whole time. Now, listen, I understand that this might be difficult for some people, and it's going to be difficult, especially with the new standard of, 5 out of 7 night, 5 out of 7 day. But I still recommend trying to run as much as you can. Running will, give you that margin of error, just in case if you, whiff on one point, or if you find yourself kind of caught up looking around like, where the hell am I? It'll give you time to reset and kind of get your bearing. You can complete it, from what I've heard. Some people do complete it by walking. I know some of my buddies at OCS had no trouble just walking the whole course and finding it. Granted, that's probably more related to or more dependent on your lane. You know, if you have points that are really close to each other, or, you know, pretty conservative, then you might not need to run. But if your points are, you know, south, north, what, you know, in all cardinal directions spread out, you're probably going to have to run. Otherwise, it might not be feasible for you to actually get 7 out of 7. Fourth, it's not really a tip, maybe a warning, is you're going to see boars. Maybe not all of you, but the chances are, especially in the nighttime, you might see boars. So as with everything in the Army, if you see wildlife, just ignore it. But there has been instances where, you know, boars have attacked OCs, and, you know, OCs have had to run a mile trying to get away from a boar, things like that. So just be cognizant. If you see a boar, if you hear it, you know, listen for it and try to avoid it. If you do end up getting chased by a boar, I mean, boars are nasty. You're not fighting off a boar, so just run. They can be aggressive, and, you know, there's been times where OCs have, no one's like died or anything, but, you know, OCs have been injured by boars. I remember when we first got to OCS, the previous class, someone had been cut up by a boar because, you know, they had stepped on like a I don't know what they're called. They're not called cubs, but a baby boar, and like the mom went berserk. So just be aware of wildlife, especially at night. I don't think boars are necessarily nocturnal. I think they kind of just travel whenever they want to travel. So you might even see them during the day, but just be aware of that. My fifth point is use the clover method. And what I mean by that, you'll probably learn about this when you take land nav courses, but essentially what a clover method is when you get to the area around your point, what you do is, you know, you set a center point and then you move. So if this is your center point, then you're going to walk out, check for the point, come back in, walk out, check for the point, come back in, like that. And that's just a way to scan the area like 100 meters to see if you're in the vicinity of the point. Because odds are, you know, even if you do everything correctly, you might be a little, you know, you might be 100 meters off, 50 meters off. So the clover method, you know, allows you to check your area appropriately and hopefully find the point. So the sixth tip is OCS land nav. And I think most land nav courses that you do, they're non-correcting or they're not self-correcting. So what this means is, you know, when you go to a point, the point doesn't have the coordinates on it. So you could be looking for, you know, point, you know, 12, I'm just going to use it for, you know, 12, whatever. You could be looking for a point, sorry. And you find a point, but it's not actually the point you were originally looking for, but you have no way of knowing. And that's because it's not self-correcting. However, that being said, most of the time, other candidates and other, you know, previous classes on the actual point itself will write down the coordinates of that specific point. So, you know, you get to your point G2 and you're like, crap, I don't know if this is actually my point or not. If you look on the actual point itself, you know, odds are, in my case, every single point, someone had written the actual point down and I was able to, you know, cross-reference like, okay, this is the point I was looking for. Now, furthermore, if you do that, if you find your point, use that to reorient yourself. And this is especially useful if you stumble upon a point that isn't even your point, but you can use that to then like reorient yourself. Because there was a couple times where I was walking through the woods and I was kind of lost. So I was like, I don't really know where I am. Like I have a general idea, and then I'd stumble on a random point. So I would go up to the point, look at the coordinates and be like, oh, okay, damn, I'm exactly right here. So I need to do this next. So that can be a good resource. The seventh tip is, so I'm sure they still do it because it's trade-off, but usually the company will put ice sheets, you know, the boxes of ice, so just in case someone heat cats. And this is unfortunately only during the summer or warmer months, but I don't think they do it during the winter. They might. I don't know if it's a, you know, universal thing that they do year round, but they'll put ice sheets at every major intersection. So you can kind of use that to kind of get hints of, okay, I'm at the intersection between like Red Diamond and Christopher Road, or Red Diamond and Anzio. So just use the ice sheets if you're kind of lost. to reorient yourself. It's a good tool. The eighth, I guess, warning is like usually in Red Diamond, the southern area is full of brush. So it might be hard to shoot in azimuth. Just be aware of that. The lower half below, I think it's like Anzio and maybe Box Spring. I forget what the road is called that intersects, but you know, in the southern portion of your boundaries, it gets really dense. Now, I have heard that they started clearing it out a little bit by burning, so that might not be the case anymore. But even so, just be aware of the brush and, you know, plan accordingly. So my last tip or warning is, so also be aware, and you'll go over this more specifically in class, but be aware of the declination. So essentially what declination is so you have your true north and you have your magnetic north. So I'm sure many of you are aware that, you know, true north is the kind of like grid where it's north is, you know, 90 degrees or whatever. It's zero technically, but you know, it makes a 90-degree angle. But, you know, relative to magnetic north, which is, you know, what your compass uses, there's a little, it's a little bit offset depending on where you are in the country. Fortunately in Georgia, I think the offset's only 5 degrees for, you know, whatever it be. It might be like 300 meters, 100 meters. I don't know the actual number, but what that means is, so if you plot a point using your grid, but then use your compass, you know, to get directions, for every 100 meters, you're going to be 5 degrees off. Something like that, where I might have got that backwards, where because it's 5 degrees off, if you walk 100 meters, then, or something like that, you're going to be so and so meters away from your point. And that's because, you know, there is a slight difference between true north and magnetic north, and you have to account for that. In Georgia, it's only like 5 degrees, but you know, in Washington, and as you go further up, just by the nature of magnetic fields or the, you know, magnetic field of Earth, where I don't know if you guys have seen, they kind of like, it's this figure, but in Georgia, they're a little bit more straight, so it's only 5 degrees. But if you go to Massachusetts or like Washington, the declination is a 15-degree difference, so you have to account for that. So you can account for that. There might be times where it might be smart to keep that in the back of your head. You'll probably be fine without it, but essentially that's what you should be looking out for. So now I'm going to go into kind of like a demonstration. I'll show you a map and kind of show you how I went about it. And hopefully it will clear some things up, or maybe hopefully it'll help some people out. And like I said, this isn't comprehensive. You know, my way of doing things might not be your preference. So just keep that in mind. I don't mean to say this is the only right way, but you know, if I can help anyone out that's struggling, then hey, I think it's, you know, worth it. Okay, so here's the little demonstration I made. As you can see, you know, we have Red Diamond here. I think with the new standard, it kind of expands, but the same, you know, tips and tricks are going to apply, and the same processes are going to apply. So you have Red Diamond going across, you have Christopher Road, Anzio Road, and you have Box Spring, and then you have the 2 main roads that kind of connect them. So unfortunately, I don't actually have the official map, but you know, it's not really needed for the intents of this video. So I'm not sure what roads you're able to actually physically travel on. During my time at OCS, we were not allowed to travel along Christopher, Box Spring, Anzio, Red Diamond, or sorry, Anzio, we could travel this. For all of these, we actually had to handrail. So if you're completely new to land nav, essentially what handrailing is you're not supposed to travel on the road directly. Instead, you have to be at least like, you know, 25 meters or whatever, and you have to travel that way through the woods. Fortunately, like I mentioned before, because so many people use, you know, Red Diamond, there's already trails along the road. You just use those. So it's pretty negligible. It's not a big deal. But make sure you're not traveling on the road, or else you can get disqualified, whatever. So back to my first point when I spoke about, you know, finding your points and finding your route from the get-go. So let's say you start around here for the just the intense. I forget where you start. It might be a little further. Might be up here. I forget. But let's say this is your starting point. So you start here, and then you plot your points, and you're given, point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5 that I just that I've labeled on the map. So, you have point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5. You should decide from the beginning what route you're going to take. Now, as I mentioned before, like if I got these points, my route would be, I would go to exactly how I labeled them. I would go this one first, this one second, this one third, fourth, and fifth. Some people might like to choose this one first, second, third, fourth, fifth. But the reason I chose, this point first is because I want to end on this point. And like I had mentioned earlier, the reason I want to end at this point is because when I start, my first point, you're going to have to run quite a lot. You have a lot of energy. So while you have, the most amount of energy and kind of like motivation, I guess, get the farthest points out of the way, especially if you have something in this area, because like I mentioned before, this area is pretty thick with brush, so it's a little harder. I know a lot of people had a lot of difficulty finding points in this area. Like if you had a point in this area, I think most people actually didn't find the point because it was so heavily dense. But, like I said, I want to do the furthest points first. So, towards the end when I'm tired, I get this one out of the way, and then I have a short distance to travel to a starting point. And with that also, it allows you a little bit more leeway towards the end if you mess up. If I'm down here at point 2, this is my last point, I have an hour left and I mess up, like, for me to get from here to here is going to take a while versus here to here is a lot easier to do. But, everyone has their preference. Some people, like I said, prefer to go, the closest first and go that way. Some people would even go that. So, do what you think is best for you, but make sure you do have a route and you kind of stick with it. And that will that will expedite your process a little bit. The second point that I want to go over is, so use your trails. And what I mean by that is, and this kind of incorporates a couple of things that I talked about, shooting 90 degrees, not using your compass. So they're going to teach you can shoot your azimuths. And what a lot of people will do is they use the intersection as their azimuth starting point. So, you have your protractor, and what they'll do is, they'll set the intersection as their starting point, and then they'll, shoot their azimuth. Sorry, I don't have a straight line, but, to the point, and then they'll be like, okay, this is, roughly, 65 degrees. And then they'll shoot their azimuth from here to here, with the appropriate pace count, whatever. For me, I didn't really like that method. I found that because of the brush that was in the way, I often found myself not able to shoot a direct azimuth, and I found myself having to go all twist around, things like that. And I often lost my direction. So instead, what I found worked for me was shooting 90 degree. So what I mean by that is, let's say we're going for this point right here. We're going for 0.5. What I would do is I would start at this intersection right here between Anzio and Red Diamond, and then I would find the pace count it takes from here to 90 degrees to this around here. So essentially what I'd do is, let's say we're using the this scale right here. I would just find how many meters. Sorry, I would just do my pace count. So let's see, right here, it's about, to right here, I would do it in segments. It's about, 400 meters, so 400 from there to, I don't know, here is about, 200 meters. And then from there to where I want to go is about, I don't know, 100 meters. You should probably, so I'm doing this fast just for the sake of demonstration, but when you're actually doing this, make sure you take the time to get accurate. So then it would be like 400, 200, 100. So I know this whole line to the 90-degree point is about 700 meters. And then you use your pace count. So in my case, every 100 meters, I walk about, my pace count's about 63, I think, around 63. So, I would count my steps, and then, whatever 63 times 7 is, quick maths, what, like 42, something like that, maybe like 49 or something like that. I don't know. 490, no, 441 or something like that. I don't know. Anyways, so I would know that, after 700 meters, using my pace count, that's where I want to shoot in 90 degrees. And then from there, I would do, how far from this 90-degree point is it to the point? And then I would be like, okay, sorry. I would be like, okay, it's, you can see right here, it's 400 meters from the 90 degree. And then I would walk 400 meters this way. So with that being said, one of the great things about red diamonds, like I mentioned before, is the fact that there's trails. So, by the time I'm like right here, you're gonna see like so many trails, and you're gonna be like, okay, this is definitely the spot where I wanna go. And then even furthermore, when you're inside this area, you're definitely gonna find that like, oh, I'm right here, oh, there's a path. And most of the time, these paths that you see, even if they go like this way, like around, like blah, 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 they lead to the point. So use your paths, follow your gut and like follow those paths. And that's what I did for every single point. That's what I did. I would, I would probably, for example, this point right here, you could do it a couple ways. You could go, use Anzio, this like road between Anzio and Brock Spring, go this way and then shoot like that. You could go from Box Spring point right here, go this way. So just so I kind of explain a little better, let's say this is my starting point here at Box Spring and this road intersection. What I do would be, okay, from here to here, it's like 400 meters. From here to kind of where I want is, 300 meters. So added together, it's about, 700 meters to the 90-degree shoot. And then, from the 90-degree shoot into the line, it's like 250. So what I would do was, using my 63 pace count, 63 for every 100 meters, I would go 700 meters, and then I would shoot in directly 250. And that usually worked for me. And just to reiterate, once again, it's because, by the time I, got right here, there would be paths that other students have made because they're so frequently traveled leading to that point. And I would often use those paths and kind of just follow them, see where they went. And the good thing about the paths is, let's say there's a path that, let's see, I'll use a different color. Let's say there's like a path that is no good. Let's say you get here and then there's a path that kind of just goes up this way. Using kind of common sense, if you take this path and then you're walking like 600 meters, that you're only supposed to walk like 250. So you can kind of like deduce that, hey, maybe this isn't the right path. Now, the fortunate thing about paths is you just have to turn around, and you're not wasting too much time. You have a path to follow, just follow it back and then try to grab a new one. So in regards to paths, that's kind of what I recommend. You can shoot an azimuth, like some people, if this is their starting point, they would start right there. They would see that point, you want to go to point 3. So like I mentioned before, then they would, I don't have a ruler or anything on me right now, but you would use a straight edge and be like, okay, so from here to here, sorry, this is actually upside down, but so from here, from my starting point at this intersection to is about, it's about 65 degrees. So then they would shoot their azimuth 65 degrees and hit that point, you know, after how far would you say that was? Probably like 500 meters. So after 500 meters shooting a 65 degree azimuth, you know, they should reach the point. You know, that works too. That just wasn't my, I guess, cup of tea. I didn't really like that method. You know, maybe in the future, if I didn't have these paths or, you know, such a direct like option to go shoot 90 degrees in, maybe that would be a more preferable procedure to use. But for me, shooting the 90 degree worked every time. It was easier because, you know, I could run, hit it, and that was it. So kind of, I'm going to digress a little bit, but I would recommend getting your walking pace count. I would get your running pace count. And then I would also get maybe your pace count going through like thick brush. That way, you know, if you want to run, you can run from here to here and still be accurate. For accuracy purposes, every time I wanted to, you know, walk this and shoot 90 degrees, I would always walk just because it was easier to keep track, whatever. But it's up to you. So next is, you know, watch out for boars. I already mentioned that. Yeah, whatever, boars might be here, whatever. I don't know where they lurk. Let's see. So, okay, as I mentioned earlier, you want to use your point. So let's say, you know, this point right here, you get to, actually, let's say there's a point right here. I'll put that as 0.8, whatever, just a random point. You're looking for 0.4, right? But let's say you take a wrong, like, fire trail, whatever, and you end up at this point right here, and you see it. You can use this point because odds are, like I mentioned before, previous students wrote on this point the coordinates. So let's say you're looking for this point, you're looking for 0.4 in red, but you find yourself at 0.8. Then you can look at the point, get the coordinates, and, you know, cross-reference that with your map. Be like, you know, this doesn't look right. Oh, I'm here when I need to actually be here. So you can reorient yourself like that, and then you can actually go, okay, so if I'm here, and the fortunate thing about the points is they're going to be very specific. You can be like, okay, so now I know I just need to go north like this, you know, 400 meters, whatever it is. So make sure you use other points to reorient yourself if you need to. Like I mentioned before, ice sheets are going to be at every intersection, major intersection. So, you know, you can use those to orient yourself. Like if you're here or you're like, oh, I don't know where I'm at, you know, so that's a, you know, pretty good way to orient yourself. I'd mentioned that in this area right here is very thick with brush, and it's very difficult for you to point down here. So just keep that in the back of your head. Like I mentioned before, the declination is about 5 degrees in Georgia and like 15 degrees in Massachusetts. So, you know, at a certain point, at a certain distance, you know, you might find yourself, you know, some amount off. And basically that means, like, let's say, you know, I have a point right here. I'm going to start right here, you know. So let's say from here, sorry, I lined it up terribly. Let's say my point was right here. And essentially what I'm trying to do is, you know, from the true north or grid north is 0 degrees. But because of declination, you know, if I shoot an azimuth, I forget the threshold. It might be like, you know, 200 meters, 100 meters. You can look this up and they'll teach it to you. Whatever that number be, you know, if I walk that number, if I walk 500 meters, let's say the number is 500, where the difference is like, so let's say I walk 500 meters, what this declination means is instead of being, you know, right here, I'm going to be traveling, you know, 5 degrees off. So just be aware of that. It's not too big of a difference in Georgia, where I think it's pretty negligible, but just for future, just keep that in mind. And they'll give you the formula. It's like 180 minus something. I can't specifically tell you, but just keep that in mind. And that's essentially it. I think that's all I have. But just to reiterate, my biggest point is, you know, just kind of expose yourself to this stuff early. If you're not, if you haven't even gone to basic, if you are thinking about joining, if you just want to prepare, maybe get familiar with reading a map, using a protractor, watching other videos that are more comprehensive to overall general land nav, and by people who are a little bit more experienced than me, that might be a good route to take. If you're in like holdover status right now, if you've been recycled, just keep working at it. I understand that, 1 week to do 2 5 out of 7, land nav courses in day and night is a little difficult, but you can do it. Just put in the work. Actually here, I'll talk about nighttime. So in nighttime, real quick, it's the same process. It's going to be a little bit slower because you are, what's it called? It's dark, so you can't necessarily run full speed without maybe like risking to trip yourself. So what you can do is, because the points, they're so reflective, they each have like a reflective thing. What you can do is, if you're in the vicinity, let's say the point's right here and you're like right here, what you can do is, if you're looking around and you can't find it, stand up real quick, or I wouldn't even stand up, but like, turn on your red light, do a quick look around and see if you can see anything reflect back at you. So technically that's not allowed. You're not supposed to be, well, at least when I was, I don't know if they've changed it, but you're not supposed to use your red light. But there was times when I was working at night, that's how I found it. I looked around to make sure it was clear. If my point was right here, and I was right here, I, turned on my red light real quick, did a quick scan of the, horizon, and then I saw that, oh, in the distance something's reflecting back on me, and then I went there, found the point. So that's a good, maybe that's a good strategy you can use. Let's see. Oh, something else I didn't talk about is, sorry, this map is a mess now, but let's say there's a point, right here, and you're doing your 90-degree shoot and you end up right here. So basically what the clover is, you start, let's say you kind of miscount your steps and you find yourself right here. You're looking around, you're like, I can't see any point. What a clover is you say right here and then you do a clover. Like, this is your path. See how it's a clover? And you kind of look around. And as you can see, at first you go this way, you don't find anything. You come back to the middle, you clover, oh, don't find anything. Come back, you clover, you find your point. So that's basically what a clover is. So that's basically it. I know this wasn't necessarily the best video about land nav. It wasn't comprehensive by any means. It's a little messy. I don't have a map, but I'm hoping that, if anything, there's some takeaway, whether it be, the clover method, whether it be, oh, I didn't know they had ice sheets there, or, maybe I will run, if someone gets anything out of it and it helps people pass, especially with the new standard, then I'm happy. So I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks.